Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com, on the sidelines outdoors at practice today. Hello, Chris. Good afternoon. Good to have you with us here.
Good to be with you guys.
Sorry to bother you. It looked like you're working hard. What are you doing, man?
I'm just taking
checking your fantasy lineup?
Trying to take attendance and get as many guys counted up before you come to me as possible. That's why I'm turning around here.
I feel like I interrupted something important.
We heard from Sean McDermott that Lorenzo's not going to have taking a day off. John Brown's taking a day off. Insecki's taking a day off. And all these guys they call veteran days is probably the GPS stuff. They do they check on their heart rate and stuff throughout the week, and these guys are due for a day off because of their exertion and their age and any other factors they put in, right? I mean, so really the only guys that we're looking at that are hurt are Andre Roberts and Taron Johnson, correct?
Right, and Tyler Kroft's going to be limited again today as he kind of works his way back into game shape, coming back from the spring foot surgery. He's done a lot of stuff. We just haven't seen him do a ton at full speed. So whether he makes that jump some point during this week from a limited participant to a full participant, I think remains to be seen. But Coach last week said sometime in the first few games here. So you got to believe that it wasn't last week. So it's either probably this week or maybe next week, unless he incurs some kind of setback.
I think one of the things you can look for as well is maybe that he gets up and, we come back tomorrow after a hard day today. He feels great, and they say, okay, you're released. And then we find out tomorrow he's full go. And then that throws a pebble into the New York Giants preparation about are they going to use this guy? And that, they get some sort of competitive advantage about it.
Yeah, I suppose that's possible. And even if he is up on Sunday, I can't imagine that they would give him like a full workload, 50, 60 snaps. I think they'll rotate those two rookies in a healthy amount. Probably Dawson Knox is the closest thing to what Tyler Kroft is from a pass-catching perspective. Not to say that Tommy Sweeney couldn't do it, but I think probably Kroft and Knox are the two best runners, route runners, shall we say, in the group.
Yeah, but the point of that is the Giants have got to be sitting there thinking, okay, they went 22 personnel a ton last week. Now they got this another tight end. What are we going to be looking at? It's just one of those things where if you can alter their preparation, it may give you an edge on them not spending enough time on what you're really going to do.
Yeah. And I don't even know if they're going to get that far down the ladder this week because their defense looked god-awful, especially on the back end against the Cowboys. I mean, busted coverages like I have never seen before, especially with a secondary that has a veteran player in Antoine Bethea at free safety, and he was one of the most guilty parties in terms of the back seven. Him and the defensive captain, Alec Ogletree, the linebacker, those two guys were off the screen and off the map and off the reservation maybe more than anybody in that whole group. You understand if a rookie first-round pick like DeAndre Baker has a couple of miscues, first career action in a regular season setting, and they rotated him in and out with Antonio Hamilton, who's a fourth-year player, but Antonio Hamilton couldn't tackle, DeAndre Baker couldn't cover, and Antoine Bethea and Alec Ogletree couldn't get people lined up or at least play the same defensive call that maybe the rest of the guys were playing, and that's why it was such a fire drill on defense for the Giants last week.
Unfortunately, though, for me, Brownie, I've seen teams, you go through that, it's easy to fix that up. All you got to do is talk louder.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would think that two veterans like Bethea and Ogletree would be able to get all those ducks in a row this week. But if I'm the Bills, I'm testing that early and often. So it wouldn't shock me if they come out and start chucking it all over the place again like they did last week, but maybe with a different personnel grouping. Why don't you spread those corners thin, which don't run deep for the Giants to begin with? Because the only guy that really held his own last week was Janoris Jenkins, who was their high free agent signing a couple of years ago. That was the only guy that played consistently, quite frankly. So if I'm the Bills and I'm Brian Daboll, not to tell him what to do, he certainly knows how to do his job. But, man, I'd throw four wide out there in a heartbeat. Spread that cornerback depth thin, see if they can handle it.
Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com at Bills practice, on the sideline of the Bills practice. So let's ask you about the Bills and start with, if you want to have 4 wideouts, you need a quarterback to throw it to him. I think it's going to be an interesting week of practice and an interesting game for Josh Allen, Chris. He led the fourth quarter game-winning comeback, obviously, last Sunday, but he has a role to play in those 4 first-half turnovers, and I'm sure he's looking to, nip that in the bud before that continues, right?
Yeah, of course. You never want to be -3 in a game in the turnover margin, and I think the last time they did that and won was 1997. So we're talking 22 years here. I think they realize, Josh chief among everybody, how fortunate they were to pull that game out and get a W. So, yeah, I mean, and ball security, has been emphasized, overemphasized time and time and time again by Coach McDermott. He's actually got on a pedestal in the locker room a football that is painted gold, and it says, "Respect the football." And even after Friday's practice here last week, he said, the 2 most important things that we have to be mindful of are, number 1, the football and respecting it, and number 2, our teammates. And so you think about where he has put the thing on the priority list. To see the carelessness that happened, and granted, some of it was happenstance. A couple of tip balls end up being intercepted. That's going to happen through the course of any NFL regular season. But the fumbles, I think, are what really stuck in his craw. So you better believe that when they go through station drills this week and go over fundamentals, I'll guarantee you that they're going to have that 2-man drill where they have one person carrying the ball, applying 5 points of pressure, and the other guy trying to punch at it and knock it out.
Chris, let me ask you a little bit about the Buffalo offensive line, which, you get mixed opinions on this week. I thought overall they were pretty good against the Jets last week, and I'd look for more of the same, allowing just 1 sack on the game. There were a couple of breakdowns. Deion Dawkins struggled a little bit against a very talented Jets defensive line, but to see Mitch Morse playing for the first time, to see Mitch Morse out in front running as well as he did and moving around like he did, it was a revelation to me. I think there could be some good things coming from this Buffalo offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know to a certain extent that when the Bills signed Mitch Morse, the book on him was mobility is a major part of his game, and credit Brian Daboll for taking advantage of that and using that in the game plan last week. I think when it came to driving that Jets defensive line off the ball and being a road grader line in the run game, they struggled at times. But when they used some of those pulling guards, pulling center plays, pulling tackle plays to get out on the edges, they were very, very effective. And so I think what Coach Daboll has to do, and granted, you're not going to go against a defensive line quite that stout every week, but if there's one thing that this Giants defensive line is known for, it's for standing in and grinding well. And they did okay last week against Dallas with Ezekiel Elliott. Not great, they did okay. I think where you can get this defensive line is out on the edge. And so that might fall into Buffalo's strengths, might play into Buffalo's strengths very well this week to get out on the edges. Because if there's one thing the Giants defense is not as a whole, especially in the front 7, they are not fast. So if you feel like you can outflank them, especially with some misdirection, I'm all for that. Go ahead and do that, because you got offensive linemen this year that can get out in front of the ball carriers and get you chunk plays.
There was some attention given to Ty and Secchi coming in late in the game for Cody Ford at right tackle. It was part of the script, as Sean McDermott said, to do that. Nevertheless, it's a little bit unusual, and there's some people that really thought Cody Ford struggled a little bit like he did in this game that he did not struggle with in the preseason. What do you make of that?
It's called a regular season defense. The scheming is just going to be more complex, and so you've got to be quick on your toes in terms of processing what's coming at you. And you know that John Feliciano, a guy who's a veteran player who has played center and guard, is communicating that stuff down the line to Cody, whether he's saying switch, on a stunt or a twist of some kind, or whether he's saying double and go. Like you can go and get your man for your one-on-one matchup later in the play. he's communicating that all to him, but seeing it all at regular season speed requires an adjustment oftentimes for a lot of rookies, and I think that's what Cody Ford was going through last week. We got to remember, these guys are a lot of rookies, got a lot of playing time last week. They're not going to be perfect on everything. It's going to be a learning process. You know, I don't think he was awful, and I don't think he was outstanding. He was somewhere in between.
Yeah, and one of the other places where they played a rookie was Devin Singletary and the running backs. Frank Gore started the game maybe in the backfield, but Devin Singletary played 70% of the offensive snaps. I don't think anybody saw that coming. What do you make of the running backs and how they're rotating him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it demonstrates the level of trust that they have in a rookie like Devin, who has got a lot to handle if he's going to be out there all 3 downs. And he was out there from the very beginning of the game last week on those first 2 or 3 series before Frank came in and actually got the first carry of the game. So to see him out there early, I think, is a good sign as far as how much playing time he's going to get going forward. And then in the second half, to spark the offense the way he did with some chunk play runs, I think is going to get him some more playing time this week. All the focus this week by the broadcasters on TV is going to be about Saquon Barkley, and deservedly so. I'm going to be interested to see if Singletary can kind of match some of that effectiveness. I'm not saying that Devin Singletary is going to be running away for 60-yard touchdowns like Saquon Barkley can. That's not in his arsenal because he runs a 4.6, 640. But in terms of getting out of tight areas and plays that look like they're going to go for a 2-yard loss and turning it into a 3 or 4-yard gain, that's Singletary's bread and butter, and I think he's going to be able to do that this week.
All right, Chris, so between those running backs, Gore and Singletary, which one is the starter and which one is the featured back?
Yeah, what are you going to try to get me in trouble now? Yeah, you like
I love the way
Sean
Sean
on the spot there, Murph. I appreciate it.
No, I love the way Sean
McDermott
McDermott
speak
handled that an hour ago at his news conference. I love the way he sort of deflected that, and I don't really know if that is even answerable, to be honest with you. I don't get that.
I think if you want to go based on time on the field, it's probably going to be Devin Singletary going forward, and I see Frank Gore as a guy that's going to be mixed in, utilized on some key downs where you need a veteran to come through for you, and Frank Gore is that in several times over. And so I think there could be scenarios that come up where Frank is just a better fit based on experience in a crunch time situation, things like
the
that,
end of the
where I
game
think
last
they're gonna
Sunday.
Say, so 20, get on the field and let's close this thing out. 4-minute drill at the end of the game. You know, you got a short yardage situation. That guy's going to be in the game. So it doesn't mean that Frank's level of importance on this roster is not there. It absolutely is. But I think the dynamic skill set and vision that Devin Singletary can offer on the field, where he can make a bad play into a good play, is invaluable. And I think that's going to get him on the field more often than not.
Well, one of the things that came out of this last game against the Jets and moving forward is going to be the Bills' defense. The only thing that happened was Taron Johnson came out with a groin injury. Other than that, they are what they were advertised. They were a top 5 defense, 223 yards allowed. They kept the Jets to 8 points offensively. They seemed better than advertised and better than a year ago. Right, exactly. That defense. What about the secondary with Taron Johnson's absence?
Yeah, so Saran Neal came in. It's a position that he's been learning since the spring, and I don't think he hurt them all that much. Now, granted, the pass rush that the Bills had going against the Jets last week was pretty darn effective, and that certainly helped the guys on the back end. With an extra week like the Giants have to perhaps game plan for what they saw from Saran Neal and the snaps that he did get on defense, it'll be interesting to see what they throw at him. But here's the thing. The Giants' slot receiver is in concussion protocol, Sterling Shepard. So do they go with a game plan that features their slot receiver? Because they're talking, if Sterling Shepard can't go, the receiver that's going to step into that role will be Russell Shepard on the Giants' depth chart. Do you make him a focal point of your offensive game plan? Because it stands to reason that the Bills are going to have a backup playing the nickel. Well, you're assuming it's going to be Saran Neal, and I think Coach McDermott left the door open today because it could be someone like Kevin Johnson, who has experience as a slot corner in this league. Heck, in some situations, it could even be Kurt Coleman, because we saw the way the Bills used Raphael Bush, the team's third safety, as a nickel last year when Taron Johnson went down. So I think there are some options at play there that could be predicated on who the Giants ultimately line up in that slot receiver position. So there's a little bit of guesswork for both teams here, quite frankly, as far as game planning goes, just because of the uncertainty as to who the opponent's going to line up in that spot on offense and defense, respectively.
Yeah, and that actually gets me to the final question I have for you, Chris, and it's sort of an overview of the game. And look, we only have the one game's worth of evidence on who the Bills might be, who the Giants might be. And based on that, it's easy to say, well, the Bills are a better team than the Giants. They certainly look like it, but it's hard to imagine the Giants' defense being that inept again a second consecutive week, isn't it? Or is it?
You would think so. I would say the one major concern, if you're the Giants, that I do not think is fixable in the short term, is their pass rush. I mean, it was sorely absent last week. I mean, you go watch the tape of the game last week, there were about a handful of plays where Dak Prescott could have opened up a folding chair, cracked open a six-pack, and had a picnic. I mean, there was just way too much time for that guy back there. I mean, he had a chance to survey the whole field right to left and then left to right again before he threw the ball. That didn't happen 1 or 2 times, guys. That happened 6 to 8 times in last week's game. If you give Josh Allen, or any NFL quarterback for that matter, 5, 6, 7 seconds, there's no DB in the league that can cover people for that long on a good defense, even like the Bills. So they've got to figure out how to dial up pressure by sending extra people. I'm talking about the Giants now, because their front three, they're big, stout players that are great against the run. But even their outside linebackers are not terribly quick off the edge. They're going to have to come up and devise some clever blitz schemes that are probably going to have to involve defensive backs if they're going to get to Josh Allen and at least move him off his spot.
So the Bills will probably see the same things that we do, maybe with some more detail, but how do you attack that if you're Brian Daboll? Last week they came out in 22 personnel with 2 backs, 2 tight ends, and then broke the formation and spread it all over the field. And you said maybe they'll go deep into the secondary, put 4 wides out there, and maybe make them go deep into their depth of secondary. Or is it a combination? What are they going to do early on if they got a team that can't rush the passer and they got a secondary that blows some coverages?
Yeah, I'd be throwing again.
Right.
I'd be throwing again. I don't care what personnel grouping Brian Daboll wants to use, but I'd come out throwing again. Spread the field and test the depth of this secondary, because to me, it's, quite frankly, guys, it's just not there. It might even be worse than the Jets secondary, which Brian Daboll decided to test in a different way. He went heavy personnel to keep base personnel defensively on the field because he thought that they could win with matchups there. This week, it may not matter what personnel grouping you throw out there. All you may have to do is just simply spread the field, and I like the Bills matchups when you get to the 3rd and 4th cover assignment. I really do. No matter whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a safety, whether it's a 4th corner, the Bills are better across the board in my estimation.
They may do that in a couple of different ways then too. They may go heavy and they may go light, both in the first series. You know, they might start using personnel combinations quick and early and often.
Yeah, the Giants just are, I think they're outmanned, quite frankly, Bills offense compared to Giants defense in terms of quality of personnel and in terms of depth of personnel. So that should spell good things for the Bills offense this week.
Thanks, Chris.
You got it, guys.
All right, Brownie.
Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com, on the practice field right around the corner here where the Bills are getting set for the New York Giants.